Don't know where I'd be without those two. So, love Father's Day. All right, so last week, I'm going to keep it brief, so a little after 11. Chris just rattling on. All right. So last week we asked the question, how long is your shadow? We were talking about the idea of, are we reproducible, or is one of us more than enough? If one of you is more than enough, that's too bad. We should be seeking to be reproducible. We should be worthy of being reproduced in the examples we set and the lives we lead. I was laughing at, inside during the What If I Stumble song, not because, I haven't stumbled. I was laughing at you. But because, that's a perfect Father's Day song, right? Because that's what every dad who actually, is really trying to do his job well freaks out about. What if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I, do something that's going to put my kid all over someday to blame his problems on me? So, we worry about that stuff. So we worry about whether or not we're reproducible, whether or not our example is valuable. We talked about 2 Timothy. It said, "Be strong in the grace that's in Jesus Christ, and the things you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to the faithful men who will go teach others also." Very important that in the church we establish a mentoring process, a legacy process. An importance of understanding what it is we're leaving behind. Legacy is not how much Bible can you teach somebody. That's fine if you are a university professor. But, the reality is the legacy that we leave is the impact that we leave behind us, the things that we transmit to those who come after us. Legacy is critical. I think a lot of us, sometimes we get so focused on the work we do, we forget about people being our legacy. Those who are in our lives are going to be the legacy that we leave. Regardless of how successful you are in your job, regardless of how awesome you are at your chosen vocation, the legacy that you leave ultimately will be that with the people who know you. It'll be with people who care. John Maxwell, in his 5 levels of leadership, when he starts talking about basically getting to the summit of leadership, it's no longer about production or position or power or permission. It's about people basically reproducing people. He believes in basically developing people. That's at the highest, that's the pinnacle of John Maxwell's leadership belief for us as individuals, is when we start developing people. He doesn't, and you gotta remember, John Maxwell, while he might be a Christian, he's writing books to management everywhere. He's writing books to people who run organizations, Fortune 500 companies, CEOs. But his point is that when you get to the top of doing what you're called to do, you will be developing people. The church should be a leader in developing people, because Jesus said what? "Go ye therefore into all the world, make disciples, teaching them to observe all things that I've taught you." Man. That's the center of what we're called to do. But so few of us actually ever get around to that. So few of us are, because I think a lot of us deal with a little bit of, self-loathing, right? Some of us think that we're not worthy of being a good, I shouldn't be reproducing, I shouldn't be, mentoring people, I shouldn't be coaching people because I don't have it all together. And I think sometimes we worry so much about, our shortcomings that we forget that Jesus didn't say, "Those of you who are perfect, go nail it." Right? He didn't say that. No. Because that would have been, pretty short-lived. But, he deals with those of us who are, struggling. And really, Christians, men and women need to actively be concerned with their legacy. I was having a great talk, actually, with my mom yesterday. We were kind of talking about Father's Day and stuff. It's important that women be concerned with their legacy too. Men, I think, by nature, whether or not they're actively doing anything about it, are legacy driven. Men sit there all day long and want their lives to matter. I can speak honestly about that because I am one. No, it's true. I know I have very feminine features. Oh wait, I can't say that anymore. Because masculine and feminine really don't mean anything anymore. But the idea is that women need to be actively pursuing how they live out their legacy as well. The people that you are reproducing, the people that you are mentoring, the people you are coaching, the people that you are bringing alongside. Women have something very strong to offer everyone, and women should be doing the same thing, pulling people along, mentoring, coaching. It's not just a dude thing. So we got to make sure that we're all actively concerned with our legacy. The assumption is the church will all be inevitably leaders. The Christian assumption, the biblical gospel assumption, is that when you come into church and you say yes to Jesus and you attend enough potlucks that sooner or later you're going to lead. That's the assumption. The assumption is not that you get to just sit there and soak it all up and steal it from somebody else who's hungry for knowledge. The reality is you should be giving information. You should be mentoring. You should be finding people that you can coach, people you can teach. There are people in your lives who listen to you. I know that might sound crazy, but there are people in your lives who look up to you, who listen to what you say, who see the way you act, who watch the things that you do, and they discern certain things about your lifestyle. You are actively mentoring and coaching somebody right now, even if you're not talking to them at all. Because somebody's watching you. If you're a manager at work, people watch you. If you got a little not Christian but unforgiven plate on your desk, take it off. But anyway, if you have one, then please understand that people are now judging every action you have as a manager by that. Right? They are. It's basically an ethical code in leadership. People will judge you by the standards you present as being important to you. And if you say, I love Jesus, and you are a jerk at work, but you're a jerk at work, the reality is you have now chosen to say, hi, I'm a Christian and all Christians are jerks. That's what you've chosen to do. So you have to understand that your legacy, in the end, all of us are going to be determined leaders. So the first example that Paul uses, and this is therefore, now he's talking about the men teaching, the men basically leading, the men basically mentoring and coaching. He goes into this first illustration. He says, therefore you must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. So the first example, the one we're talking about this week, is being the good soldier. I'm not going to use any Carmen videos or anything, but those would have been really good. Hardship. Part of the lesson we must teach others is how to deal with hardship. That is the core of what he's saying. Part of the lesson that you teach, this is perfect, it's falling on Father's Day as well, because part of the lesson that you teach in life is how you deal with hardship. It is what shows people who you are. How you deal with hardship. Anybody can deal with the good things. He's just so happy when he gets gifts. Right? Does that teach you anything about that person?
No.
Not much, right? It doesn't teach you much of anything. He has been so happy since he won the lottery. So good to see him happy. Right? When good things happen, we don't really learn much. What we learn is how people deal with hardship. Hardship is defined as pain and suffering. So how many of you enjoy pain and suffering? No one. No one in this world, I guess there's that one group of people, but no one enjoys pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is awful, right? When pain comes into our lives, emotional pain, difficulty, turmoil, tribulations, all kinds of things come into our lives. Pain and suffering is what is considered hardship biblically. So when Paul says you endure hardship, you endure pain and suffering, you endure torment, you endure difficulty, like a good soldier. So he later says, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have a peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we also have access by faith to this grace, in which we stand and rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Now, the reason I included those verses in this context is very important. Paul is coming at it from an understanding that we have hope in grace. That the attitude of everybody sitting here today is hope because of grace. Everyone should be sitting here today, should have hope because of grace. So you have hope because of grace. Right. Everyone should know that in church if you've been in church more than 7 minutes. Right? Because that is the centerpiece of why you are here. Now, if you're here to be taught how to live or taught the better things to do, it's fine. But the reality is, church is about hope because of grace. It is a reminder that all of us live with hope. So then Paul breaks down where hope comes from. He says not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character creates hope. So he starts with tribulation producing perseverance. So pain and suffering produce the ability to persevere. Persevering being a word basically which, talks about the ability to withstand. We'll talk a little more about that in just a second. But with tribulations, without tribulations, we cannot produce perseverance. You cannot produce it without difficulty. Something has to push against you.
That's right.
Something has to make it hard so that you can overcome it and get stronger. And in strength comes perseverance. So something has to continually mold us. Difficulties come into our lives. Things come up against us. We deal with stuff and we continue to overcome that. And in that comes strength. In that comes the ability to persevere, right?
Right.
Same thing if you like to work out or you like to run. You don't run out there. If 28 miles required zero preparation, then it's not worth doing. But the reality is every step comes difficulty with every step. And you learn to push through it. And by pushing through it, you create perseverance, right?
Yes.
So in that, trials create that. We cannot have it without trial. Something must push so that it strengthens our spirit and deepens our soul.
Right.
Something has to push against us. And things that push against us are not always pleasant, wonderful, amazing things. They're hardships, they're pain, they're turmoil. And when I was in high school, I had a weightlifting, because I used to do that. We had a weightlifting coach, and he was awesome. He was like 118 years old. And he had all these cool little phrases to help motivate me to push through difficulty. Like my favorite one was, "Hey Lima, you're playing the game. And the game's called You Lose." It was his favorite thing to say to me every time, because he just thought I wasn't trying hard enough. So he would stand there and he would drive and he would push and he would, be mean and just grumpy pants and, but that was his motivation. He was bringing that pain, bringing that hardship, and helping me learn to push through the pain, push through the things that were difficult, that allowed me to get stronger. And so suddenly, that weight that once seemed daunting now seems so achievable. The difficulty seems now, no problem. But if I would have started there, it would have been impossible to overcome. In trials and hardships that make us battle tested, right? They allow us, they give us the opportunity to persevere. They give us the chance. And so perseverance is the quality that allows someone to continue trying to do something even though it is difficult. Now look at that definition one more time. It's the quality that allows us to continue trying to do something. To continue trying to push through, even though it is difficult. The problem we have with modern perseverance is we call it surviving. Life's terrible. What you going to do? I'm going to huddle in the fetal position in the dark and wait till the storm blows over. That's survival, not perseverance. Because you're not trying to do anything. But I hear from a lot of people in sort of our modern pop understanding of how we live our lives, we kind of label perseverance survival. I'm just going to hide from it. By the grace of Jesus, I survived the difficulty in my life. Well, what did you do with it? Did you interact with it? Did you work through it? No, but I made it through. But you didn't learn anything. Because by making it through, all you did was duck and dodge the stuff that was coming into your life.
Yeah.
That's modern perseverance. True perseverance is going back to the definition I put up just a second ago, right? Allows you to continue trying to push through, to continue working at something, even though it's difficult. How many of us know who that is? I told you his first name was Ernest. Huh? No.
Fortnite.
Huh?
Fortnite.
Huh?
Ernest Fortnite.
It looked like New Rock.
What if I said his last name started with Shackle? Or Shackleton. Anyway, Ernest Shackleton, right? The great explorer. This was the ad to go with him years ago. Men wanted for hazardous journeys, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success.
Sounds like fun.
How many of us would sign up for that?
Do you get the sweater?
Suspenders. Should have wore suspenders. Great explorer, right? Traveled around the world. In a time when boats, the motors were the wind. Probably the most famous story about perseverance from him is that his men were trapped. How many of you guys have heard this story? They were stuck. An iceberg had broken off and smashed their ship against the shore, right? So he had all these men, hundreds of men stuck, stranded for a year in Antarctica. And so he realized he had to do something. So I think it was on July 6th, 1920, he set sail with 4 other people and rowed his boat, a tiny little ship, to find a whaling community to survive. And in that, he rowed 800 miles. Now, 800 miles. 800 miles in the bitter cold with 4 others. They got there, and then they had to climb up over cliffs, down a glacier. They got almost to the whaling community, realized they went the wrong way, got stuck. The cliffs were impassable. So at this point, they had to turn around. And when they had to turn around, his men said they wanted to sleep. So they said, if we don't sleep, we're going to die. So he let them sleep for 5 minutes. Then he woke them up and told them it had been half an hour. Then he got them up. They retraced their steps. They found their way to the whaling community. 3 months later, they were able to go back and save his men. That's perseverance in the midst of pain and suffering. When asked about the reason he didn't let his men sleep longer, his answer was, if I would have laid down, we would have died.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of us aren't going to have that kind of moment, because most of us aren't dumb enough to get on a boat and go there, right? At least not then. It's an incredible story of overcoming pain and hardship and pushing through. He didn't just survive. He didn't just huddle down and say, well, we'll just wait until hopefully somebody at the ship shows up. What did he do? He pushed, he tried, he continued to work, even when things were horrible. He had a plan, he had a desire, he had a goal in mind and a way to grow. That's what he wanted to do. So the next thing it says, perseverance produces character, right? Character means moral excellence or firmness. It's a resolve, it's a strength. It comes from inside of us, a moral excellence. So perseverance galvanizes our excellence and makes firm our stance. So we go through difficulty. Difficulty comes alongside and begins to hammer away at us. And it can either sharpen us or it can destroy us. We make a decision of what to do. We make the choice. But trials come along and they're hitting us and they're hitting us and they're hitting us. And we can either allow it to sharpen us and strengthen us and create perseverance and character, or we can let it destroy us. We can let it create a shape in us that isn't healthy. Instead of the steel becoming stronger in our lives, steel can become weaker because we're not holding together. We're not allowing it to develop within us a moral excellence. And what do I mean by that? A lot of us have our triggers, our responses, the areas where we're weak, the areas where we're strong. And when those hardships come in, a lot of us have these little weaknesses that are responses to hardships. Some of us are immoral when things get difficult. Some of us are extremely moral. Most of us are probably somewhere in the middle. But hardships cause us to lash out. When things go bad, we lash out a lot of times. We respond. And the truth of who we are comes out in that response. So if you could think of a time in your life when, man, things got really tough, how did you respond? That's the depth of your moral excellence. So if things get difficult and your first response is to throw your hands in the air, drop F-bombs and start getting all frustrated, that's the depth of your moral excellence. when things get more and more difficult, how we respond shows who we are inside. And so when we talk about this idea of legacy, that's what people remember. That's what people see. Now, we never teach that. You don't have to teach your children the depth or the firmness of your moral excellence. You don't have to say a word, they will see it. If the only way your children are taught moral excellence is through what you say, if the way you live is getting a counter argument, that one wins every time. So the idea that, Paul's example here, Paul's formula, is built on perfection, right? It's built on the proper response. So trials, pain, and suffering come into our lives, and they create perseverance. Well, now, he's saying good perseverance, right? Paul's not saying, it could really go south on you. No, he's wanting to identify the quality way to live. So when he says he creates perseverance, it creates that ability to keep trying, to keep pushing through even though it's hard. As a Christian, sometimes the hardest thing to be in the world is a Christian. Because it would be so much easier if I didn't have to be one right now, because there's something I really need to say to this guy sitting in front of me at a baseball game yesterday. Just pulling out the sky. Right? It would be so much easier to not be one. It would be so much easier to just respond. It would be so much easier sometimes to just stick it to your boss. The guy's a jerk, so you know what? I'm going to light his office on fire. I don't know, whatever you should think. But sometimes it's just so much easier to do that stuff, to show them what for. The hard thing is to do what Paul's saying, where, as those hardships, that pain comes in. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is to flip out. Sometimes it's really easy to flip out. The hard thing to do is keep control. The hard thing to do is to manage your emotions in a healthy way. It's so much easier to just go bananas. It's so much easier to lose control. It's so much easier to lash out at other people and make it their fault. It's so much easier to do that. So much easier to be that person who always blames somebody else. It's so much easier than going, okay, it's my fault. That's mine. I should own that. That was me. It's so much easier to blame somebody else. And that's why, when Paul's talking about this perfect scenarios, perseverance galvanizes that excellence. Because the more you do it, the more truly excellent your morality is, the more truly firm your inner resolve is. If you see no growth in your ability to persevere, if you are the same flip out, crazy, every time something happens in your life as you were 20 years ago, you have not developed any perseverance. Because just because you survived, that's not the perseverance Paul's talking about. And I think what's amazing is how few Christians have any scope of the past. Have any scope of what God has brought them through, of the things that they've been able to overcome in their lives, of the things they've been able to walk through. So few Christians can remember any of it because all we're focused on is the next problem. And we forget all this awesome stuff that's happened. We get so consumed with, oh my gosh, God, why are you letting this happen to me? And he's like, are you serious? Really? Remember yesterday when you pulled over to the side of the road and you were like, thank you, Jesus, for saving me from that crazy driver? It's like you forgot that already. Now we're riding on to this guy who's really slow at the checkout counter at the grocery store. Just pulling that out of this guy. Right? That doesn't bother me at all. Right? Check writers. By the way, if you're a check writer,
Right.
have your check prepared before they tell you the total. How much? No, it should be signed. Save mark. Should be done. Anyway, so the idea is that if we can take a good look at the things that we've been through, it's amazing the change and the depth to which our stance becomes more firm. Many people survive suffering, and their character is worse than before. I have met a lot of people who survive suffering and are way worse off. They didn't get any better. They're even worse now, right? Because now you get the Eeyore thing. Right? God hates me. God's gonna kill me. God hates everything I like. My life's horrible. Well, man, well, you made it through that thing yesterday. That's pretty cool. It'll be worse tomorrow. And you're like, well, Jesus is still on the throne, and thanks for that grace and that hope that we have in Jesus. Whatever. You know, it's like I've met people who survive stuff, and they're worse than they were before. You know, one of my favorite people from history is Joshua Chamberlain. Not just because he had a sick stash, but Joshua Chamberlain. Ever heard of him? What's wrong with this country? All right. Joshua Chamberlain. If you guys could, I don't know, how many of you have Netflix? Just half? What's wrong with this country? No. How many of you have Amazon Video? And Netflix? Or Netflix? How many of you have VCR? Okay. Go and rent / Prime is probably free. Go rent / download Gettysburg, the movie, from like 20 years ago, and watch it. Okay? Joshua Chamberlain was the officer in charge on Little Round Top. If he loses, the war would have been different. Joshua Chamberlain was given an impossible job with not enough people to defend the left flank of the Union Army at Gettysburg. Okay? Please go watch this movie. No, I'm not joking. Like, seriously, it would be a great Father's Day activity. The Chamberlain he leads the defense of Little Round Top of the left flank of the Union Army. What makes what he did so incredible is that he was running out of people and running out of bullets. And in the South, the Confederate Army continued to charge, and they were going to take the left flank. And if they took the left flank, it would have been very easy for them to go right up over Big Round Top, all the way through to Cemetery Ridge, right? Everybody with me? He chose to do something insane. When he realized that they were out of bullets, which is bad, right? Even when you're loading them one at a time. He did something crazy. He decided to charge. Because he felt under the circumstances that his men had the advantage because they were running downhill. So, it's played by an actor named Jeff Daniels in the movie. Wow. But anyway, so they fixed bayonets and the men charged down the hill. Perseverance produces character, substance, firmness, and understanding, to where you become unshakable even when things seem impossible. Perseverance is the ability to continue to do things even when they're difficult. For Joshua Chamberlain, he chose to charge, which is crazy. It worked, because even the South was like, okay, that's crazy. They're running at us. Right? But he chose to do that. He showed perseverance in how everything he had been through as a soldier up to that point, his regiment had suffered huge losses, even before the Battle of Gettysburg. Everything they had been through had created an understanding that he could push through and continue to try and continue to do, even when things were hard. And he had perseverance, and that perseverance, he knew they had to win. Sometimes I think we get to a point to where we couldn't care less ultimately about the mission. As Christians, I think sometimes we become so self-centered that we forget about the bigger picture, which is that people are dying every day and going to hell. We forget about the bigger picture, that, you know what, people don't know, that somebody cares about them. We lose sight of the bigger picture, that there are people out there who have no idea anybody in this world gives a flying flip-de-doo about them. And we're sitting there just going, well, but I got my salvation. The idea of what he did had the bigger picture in mind. There was a really good chance, and actually, if you read the book Killer Angels, which, just watch the video, I think that's probably enough of the stuff, really, at this point. But if you read the book Killer Angels, there's actually a moment where he charges down the hill and he gets stopped by a guy pointing a pistol right at his face. And he just said, I'm going to die, and stood there. And the pistol didn't go off, it misfired. The idea is that sometimes we think, oh yeah, I'm willing to do that if I know it's all going to be okay. Or we get so self-centered. For him, it could have just said, you know what? Let's back out. Let's go over here with his other regiment. Let's bail out. We don't have to hold the left. We'll be fine. But instead, he realized that he was going to sell his life for the bigger value. And the bigger value in this case was he was not going to let those behind him get hurt. He was not going to fail because he couldn't persevere. And I think sometimes as Christians, we get so consumed with how everything affects us as individuals that we lose sight of the bigger picture. And somehow we become okay with not fulfilling the Great Commission. We become okay with not actually meeting people outside of our church. We become okay with not talking to people. We become okay with not caring about people. We become okay with not really reaching out to people because you know what? Who cares? I have mine. We become so convinced that no big deal. I don't care. We'd never come out and say it because then we'd have to admit we're big old fatty hypocrites. But, the reality is that that's kind of what we think in our heart. Is if it doesn't affect me, who cares? I'll go do something for Jesus, if I get credit. Well, then now it's all about you. The reality is we quit caring about the bigger cause. We quit caring about the bigger issue. So our character is really quite weak. Our character is actually pretty shallow, if we have any character at all. And then ultimately, character produces hope. It is our substance that allows us to hope, our excellence and our moral firmness. The reality is, we do not have hope in Jesus if we do not have substance in Christ. Now, you can sit here and look me in the eye and go, I thank Jesus for the hope I have in Him. But if you don't really have any substance, you're just talking to sound like a Christian-y person. Because you're not really living with that hope. If that hope isn't what drives you in the way you exist, and the things that you do, and the way that you live, and the risks you're willing to take, if the bigger picture does not drive your risk, then what's the point? Then you don't really have hope in Jesus. You have a really nice relationship with your church. And that's great, don't get me wrong, we should have a relationship with our church. But our substance is what allows hope. People who don't have substance in Jesus don't have hope in Jesus. I don't care what you tell me. I don't. Because the reality is, if it's not authentically inside of you, if it's not really who you are, then you're just kind of punching the numbers and punching the buttons and doing your thing. It looks like it's something I should be doing. Real hope comes from substance. There are moments as a football coach when you're standing on the sidelines and your team is getting steamrolled. And they're like, can we come back, coach? Totally. There's no substance there, right? I know we can't because we don't have the substance to survive. I know that it ain't going to work. I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and a lot of times that's how we are as Christians. We say what we're going to say. The ingredients, ultimately, of who we are make the flavor. There's no flavor comes of its own choosing. We might want to say we have hope. We might want to say we have moral excellence. We might want to say that we persevere. But if we don't really have those things, then that's not really who we are. Flavor does not choose flavor. Ingredients choose flavor. Right? The reality is what's in it ultimately decides how it comes out. What's really is going to be what it produces. And so for each of us as Christians, what are you producing? That's the ingredients you're putting in. That's who you really are. If you're persevering with strength, if you're overcoming and you're continuing to push through no matter how difficult things get, then that's one of the ingredients in your life. That will ultimately within you produce a moral excellence, a firmness, a strength. If you are continuing to have the same moral problem, and I think sometimes we define, we say moral problem, we go extreme. But the reality is the Bible is God's moral will, right? This is how I want you to live. That's a moral will. Morals are more than just, how you act as a married person or how you act sexually. The reality is morals are bigger than that. The Bible is God's moral will. So if it's about basically building moral excellence, If you're continuing to struggle with the same thing, then you're choosing to not persevere when those difficulties come in that particular area. Of course, it's tough to overcome addiction. That's why we label it addiction. Of course, it's tough to overcome a sinful nature. That's why we call it a sinful nature. Because we are drawn to it, we are pushed to it. It holds us, it grabs us. But we have to continue to persevere in the midst of that and overcome that. That's what creates strength. The more we walk away, the more we push through, the more we become that change. If our character isn't built on moral excellence, then we can survive and still be hopeless, right? If your strategic perseverance strategy is to survive, then you will just continue to be hopeless. If you push through, then you develop hope. If you choose to allow the circumstances of your life to control your response, you are surviving. If how you are as a person is completely dependent upon how your life is playing out circumstantially, then you have a problem. And I don't just mean if you're happy when things are happening. I mean if you allow temptation, you allow opportunity, you allow those things to dictate how you're going to respond, then you have a problem. The truth is, perseverance allows me to push through those things. It allows us to push through those things to where we don't become distracted, like Paul said, by the things of this life while we're trying to do our job. And our job is the mission of God on earth. And if we get distracted by this other stuff and pushed aside, then ultimately we fail way more people than just us. As Christians, if we're not loving people, we fail way more people than just us. Pain and suffering only create resolve if we allow them to. You can allow pain and suffering to destroy you. You can allow pain and suffering to, make you start thinking you were born under a bad sign. Right? You can allow pain and suffering to make you feel like life's awful and I can't get out of it, and you know what, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to let it weigh on me and destroy me. Or you can allow it to be something that galvanizes you as you see yourself overcoming those things and pushing through those things as you go along. Resolve only creates moral excellence if our resolve is godly and our response is Christ-like. The reality is, it only creates moral excellence if we respond morally. If we respond immorally to crisis, that doesn't create moral excellence. So that's important. The other thing is moral excellence will create a knowledge that we can overcome. It's important that we know that we can come back, that we can deal with it, that we can push through it. And finally, the legacy we leave, the shadow we cast, will come from how we deal with hardship. Because hardship will come. And, it's been an interesting week at the hospital with Gabe. And I will say this, that there are a lot of things about him that, since I've known him for so long, that I admire. But there is nothing that I admire more than him being a good example of what we just talked about. A lot of us can't understand what it would be like. Maybe there's some of you in this room who can't, but I can't fathom what it would be like. But in his life, his pain and suffering has produced perseverance. I was sharing with his mother when she asked me, when she was talking to me on Friday. And I said, his legacy may never be his vocation, his legacy may never be his occupation, his legacy may never be the people he impacts professionally. But there is a huge list of people he has impacted by the way he has dealt with crud. And, and I shared the story about when I was in college, I went out and played football on the weekend, and I just came back, we were all beat up, because we were college kids and stupid. And I remember walking in and we're all complaining about our injuries, and Gabe's sitting there, right? And it was like half through the conversation, I'm like, yeah, I just totally did this to myself, so I should quit complaining. He's hurting, and all he did was get up in the morning. And I've watched him persevere, and I've watched that perseverance develop character. And I've seen that character develop hope, to where he can sit in the hospital with a smile on his face, facing, a life-altering surgery with a smile on his face. And making jokes, which were not always appropriate to certain people in the room, but to him and me, they were, and to see, we all laughed. But the reality is, He is the best example I've ever seen of this. And I find it amazing when someone looks me in the eye and they're like, my life's so horrible, why does God hate me? And I'm like, you should know my friend. Well, because he didn't get enough folic acid in the womb, it's now gone through all of this for the last 42 years. The reality is, he doesn't have to say a word. Right? I know he has character, I know he has hope, and I know he knows how to persevere, and I know he's dealt with tribulations just because I've watched him. He doesn't always say the right thing. Never says the right thing. But I know he has character, and I know he has hope. And I know that he is looking forward to the sweet new body that he's going to get in heaven soon, which hopefully is, still a solid 30 years off. But the reality is, I believe him when he says he has hope. Because I've seen him persevere trials, and I've seen him work them and not ignore them. And I just think we will be judged by people in our lives, by how we deal with hardships. And if we can't deal with hardships, then people in our lives don't see Jesus. Doesn't mean you don't struggle. Doesn't mean you don't hurt. Doesn't mean you don't suffer. All of us do when we go through those things. But it doesn't mean that in the end we overcome them. Because we have hope and we know. So let's close in prayer and we can get to ingesting all the fatty hamburgers we can possibly do. Father God, we just thank you so much for this morning, God. We just pray your blessing over Gabe in that hospital room today. And God, we just thank you for the example that he has modeled for us of being a man of God with true hope and all that you have done. And that sometimes maybe our, the hope that we profess is just lip speak, but with him I just know it's the truth. So God, I just pray for him in that room today. I pray for Michael and Connor spending Father's Day in the hospital. God, I just pray for a strength over their family. I pray for all the men in this room today, their fathers or husbands or sons. God, I pray that we can be men who model the ability to walk through hardship the way that Paul talks about how we should, with perseverance, with character, with hope. God, may we be men who smile, men who have fun, men who don't take ourselves too seriously. And God, men who more than anything know that you have your hand on our lives. And we are to live lives that imitate you for our kids and our friends and our families to see. Pray for all of that in your name. Amen. All right, so go. Have a great time. Have a good Father's Day and Father's Day.